In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. Again, you're dealing with a thug here. The folks at The Atlantic dropped a story today that laid out exactly what it is that Republicans are trying to do. What they're doing right now is they are working. The Trump campaign is working with lawyers in the various states that where they want to challenge. They're planting the seeds. This is the headline in The Atlantic: the election that could break America. And what they're trying to do in this story here, okay, and this is what the lead says: there is a cohort of close observers of our presidential election, scholars and lawyers and political strategists, who find themselves in the uneasy position of intelligence analysts in the months before 9/11. And it goes on and on and on. What it lays out in this article is that what Republicans are trying to do is that if it is close in states, what they will then do is say, forget this, forget the counting, it's going on too long. We're going to declare that we know what the will of the voters are and choose the electors ourselves. Now, let me take you back to 2000. Folks, you have to remember, in Florida actually exposed for people the first time an understanding of the Constitution. First, there is no affirmative right to vote in the United States Constitution. When you hear people say voting is a right, that's simply not true. There is nothing in the Constitution that affirms that every voter has a right to vote. Because of amendments, it does say you cannot prevent folks from voting because of race or gender. So what people didn't realize was that when looking at the laws, the way this country was set up, I keep telling y'all beforehand, this is why civics is important. The country was set up for white men who own land to control the nation. So state legislatures actually have the power to choose electors. The Electoral College was a slavery compromise. And so they wanted to be able to control who became president. So what Donald Trump is doing is they are trying to work with Republican legislatures to say that if it's close in several states, that these legislatures will simply say enough is enough, and we are going to choose the electors from the state, and we are going to discern what the voters actually wanted to happen. That's what is going on. This arena is what people really need to be paying attention to, because Donald Trump has no problem, and the Republican Party has no problem with thrusting America into a constitutional crisis, because it is their desire to hold on to power regardless of what happens.
You know, I've got a slight smile on my face because I know what's really at play here, right? And it's they want that crisis so they can litigate their way out of it. They can use these courts through which Donald Trump has got his people in. Okay, look, there's so many examples. Just look at the past 4 years, but particularly look at the past 4 months. There's so many good cases that tell us that these are Donald Trump's judges. It was always about the judges' role. And this is always what it's been about in electing this, two-time philandering fool. He's a fraudster. He's, a schmuck who basically has gotten so good at conning folks. And this is how he's doing it. He's using the courts to get his way. So yes, Republicans want that constitutional crisis. They thump the Constitution, but they do what they wish will. They would do what they will with it. And their wish essentially is to disenfranchise voters who look like us. They do not want us to have what they have. This is about a tale of two Americas. I've said it over and over again these past few years. There is not one America in which we are equal to white people. And this is extremely difficult for me to say as a conservative, coming up in this career. And I've always held myself at the same standard, but what I've seen in what Donald Trump has done in using our judiciary for his gains, I have seen very clearly that many a conservative is okay with that if it means that they go untouched, if their lives are unimpacted. So therefore, if the lives of others are impacted, okay. That's a casualty. But we will litigate this the way we want so that we will get the justices that we want. That's what it's always been about. I realize that sounds like a very elementary argument. I'm making an overly simplistic, perhaps, analysis of the situation. But it's very, very important that we talk to our friends and family who may even think that he is not the threat to the Constitution that he is. It's very, very important that we speak to them in simple terms about it. This is a constitutional crisis that they are welcoming.
Scott, I'm going to read this here. This is from the Atlantic piece. The worst case, however, is not that Trump rejects the election outcome. The worst case is that he uses his power to prevent a decisive outcome against him. If Trump sheds all restraint, and if his Republican allies play the part he assigns them, he could obstruct the emergence of a legally unambiguous victory for Biden in the Electoral College and then in Congress. He could prevent the formation of consensus about whether there is any outcome at all. He could seize on that uncertainty to hold on to power. Trump's state and national legal teams are already laying the groundwork for post-election maneuvers that would circumvent the results of the vote count in battleground states. Ambiguities in the Constitution and logic bombs in the Electoral Count Act make it possible to extend the dispute all the way to Inauguration Day, which would bring the nation to a precipice. The 20th Amendment is crystal clear. The president's term in office shall end at noon on January 20th, but the two men could show up to be sworn in. One of them would arrive with all the tools and power of the presidency already in hand. This is why, Scott, I have made it clear to people that the vote in states cannot be close. There has to be no doubt. If Joe Biden beats Donald Trump by 2, 3, or 400,000 votes in Florida or North Carolina and Georgia, then you're not going to have these games because it will be no doubt. That is how you beat this thug and his Republican imps at their own game.
Yeah, we got to do it. As you were reading that piece in Atlantic, I was thinking, so where's the military going to be on this? Because we're going to be in crisis and like a third world junta. Let's just see where the military is going to be on this. I tell you what else this begs, though, as a question, is the importance of the Senate races. Because if the Senate turns to Democrat and the House stays Democratic, then if he pulls any of these maneuvers with the electors at the state level, that will be challenged in state court and all the way to the Supreme Court. But it's got to be done by January 1st. And depending on if the electors are selected by the state legislature, they're right. That would be a lot quicker, but it would be under legal challenge. But if the Senate and the House both have run by the Dems, then there's more maneuvering after January 1st that both houses could do to either impeach him or remove him. But we've never had an unpeaceful transfer of power. If we get to January 1st at noon and there's no declared winner, what do we do? You're right, two could show up, but that's just borders on the nonsensical. That makes no sense. And so the Democrats have to be as prepared as the Republicans are in laying this groundwork. But I agree, we're going to be in constitutional crisis, and I have no doubt that Trump, if it's close, he's not leaving. Or we're going to have to throw him out or impeach him again.
What we are seeing, Robert, we're seeing again Trump and the Republicans try to use all these tactics. They are suing folks in Pennsylvania, suing folks in Georgia. And what they hope is they hope these federal judges agree with them. And what their game plan is to appeal every decision up to the Supreme Court. That's why they want to seat this justice so bad, because they want a 6-3 majority. And if John Roberts chooses to go the way of the liberal justices, then they still have a 5-4 win. That is their strategy, Robert Patillo.
Well, it's interesting because I remember being in law school and being outside picketing the Supreme Court during one of my summer internships when John Roberts was up for confirmation, because we thought he would be the most far right-wing justice on the court at the time, and here he is now the swing justice on the court. It's not because he got any more liberal during the time he's been on the court. It's because the court has gone so far to the far right that now what we used to think was a radical conservative on the court is now the moderate swing voice on the court. And let's also remember, it was just a couple months ago that the Supreme Court ruled that the electors have to go along with what the state says. That you cannot have rogue electors. You cannot go against what the state has voted for, what the state has decided for you. So we're no longer, they've stripped the electors themselves of having the power to step away from what's been said and to vote their own hearts and vote their own conscience, vote their own minds. So yes, we are set up for a constitutional crisis. We're going to have back-to-back constitutional crises. One on the replacement of Justice Ginsburg on the court, which is going to be a constitutional crisis, and we're not quite certain how that battle is going to go. And then secondarily, if the election is even within sniffing distance, because last time Hillary won by 3 million votes, and there was still consternation. And we're not going to see a situation where Republicans do the honorable thing like Al Gore did and just concede, or do the honorable thing like John Kerry did and not have a recount in Ohio because it was what was in the best interest of the nation. These people are going to fight and claw, because what they're fighting for is something very different than what Democrats are fighting for. Democrats want health care. We want a clean environment. We want education for our children. We want a foreign policy that is humble. We want the regular things in politics. Listen to what they were talking about at the Republican convention. Listen to Matt Gaetz. Listen to Charlie Kirk. They're talking about a fight in defense of Western civilization, that the last man standing between the mob, between the hordes, between the immigrants, between America being overrun by minorities is Donald Trump. This is the American carnage that Donald Trump talked about in his inaugural address. So we can't pretend that we're fighting the same fight and that we're fighting by the same rules. Democrats are still playing by the traditional rules of politics. The Republicans right now are fighting the battles of the Holy Roman Empire. They're fighting against the mongrel hordes and the Umayyad Caliphate. They think that they are in an existential crisis for the future of whiteness in this country, and it will be a white majority nation going forward. And because of that, they are willing to use every tool in the basket, and don't expect them to just lie down and do the right thing.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding for services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please, take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.